Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on adapting the rules of fighting fantasy to Twine games. So in the last video on this series, we had a combat between a player character and a single monster. And in this video, I have gone to the next stage, I suppose, which is combats against more than one monster. So we have a little blurb here that says you face two skeletons, and when I click continue, we have, as promised, two skeletons with their stats, and we have a button underneath each of them, and we have the text, choose which enemy to attack. So I'll choose which enemy to attack, and then I'll explain why you have to choose. So, all right. So, I rolled a 7 plus my skill of 7, which gives me 14. The skeleton number 1 got a total of 14 as well, and skeleton number 2 got a total of 11. I tied with skeleton 1, we got 14 each, and I beat skeleton 2. But I didn't wound skeleton 2. And the reason for that is you have to choose which enemy you're attacking, and you can only wound that enemy. The fact that I beat skeleton 2 means that it didn't wound me, so my stamina hasn't lowered, but I don't do any damage to it. If I'd picked differently, if I'd chosen to attack skeleton 2 and we got the same results, then I would have wounded skeleton 2. I will say that having two identical enemies is probably slightly bad design, because you get the choice of which one to attack, but it's not really a choice, of course, because they are mechanically identical. So I probably should have had one with slightly more stamina or slightly more skill. But anyway, I just want to demonstrate how the system works. So this round is now over. I press continue, and then I have to choose again. So I'm just going to choose this one again. This time I wounded skeleton 1, and again I actually tied with skeleton 2, but it doesn't matter whether I tied with it or beat it. That wouldn't have made any difference because I wasn't attacking it. So its stamina is now down to 4. So I'll click through this a bit more quickly. Oof, did not do well. There we go. So I have now killed one of my enemies. I suppose in a sense it was dead anyway, but it's not, whatever. It's out of the fight. And now its picture is different. Unfortunately, it would be very useful if there was a command that said, print this picture, but print it in black and white. Unfortunately, there isn't any such command, or at least I don't know of one. You have to just make two different pictures. So when I was setting this up, I made this picture, and then I turned it into black and white and saved the black and white version to be the one to indicate that the enemy is dead. You might want to do more than that. You might want to put like an X across it or a slash across it like that to show that it's sort of, been taken care of, or it's out of the fight. You might want to put a little, I don't know, skull or something over it as a symbol to show that it's dead, but I just went with black and white anyway. And now, because there's only one enemy, I don't have to choose who I'm attacking, of course. So we just click through until, there we go, until we've beaten both of them. And it says, you have won the battle. And when we press continue, it says your adventure continues, which of course isn't true, because we haven't coded it. But in a real game, of course, we would then continue on with the main body of the adventure, of which the combat was a sort of a little diversion or a subroutine. So that's what it does. As with all of the code that I make, I would encourage you to download it from itch.io, which is where I keep all the code examples that I make. The location is in the description of this video. I'm going to try a slightly different format this time. Normally what I would do is I would go through this code line by line and explain what every line does. I tried that and it seemed like it was a bit much. It was a bit too much information to really be memorable. So I'm going to try something slightly different. I'm just going to tell you what every page does, like give you a sort of overview of how the program works. And then if people are interested, I'll go through the individual pages in future videos. So I'm not sure if that's a good change. Let me know whether you think it is or isn't. But yeah, in this particular case, the code is a bit, there's a lot of code, and there's no new commands. If there were new commands or new ways of doing a particular effect, well, I'd tell you that. But this is all using commands that we've already dealt with in previous videos. So we have story caption, which is what happens in the sidebar. It basically prints the Fighting Fantasy logo and the stats of the character. You probably noticed that as the skeletons wounded me, my stamina was going down, and it was telling me my current stamina as well as my starting or maximum stamina. So it would say like 14 out of 14/20, meaning currently it's 14 and it's sort of your maximum healthy value is 20. That's all done in here. Initialize is just, it sets up the variables and it rolls it sets up the initial values of all of the variables. So it rolls what your skill, stamina, and luck are. And if you saw the previous video, you might remember that we had this page combat. Well, now that's been expanded to 3 pages because it's a little more complicated, actually quite a lot more complicated. The main complexity is that we display the enemy twice, or we display the enemy in 2 different circumstances. In other words, if you think back to the beginning of the video, you'll notice that we had the pictures of the skeletons and their name, skeleton 1, skeleton 2, their skill, their stamina, and then we had 2 slightly different displays. One, we had the buttons where you go, okay, click on one of the buttons and to choose which one to attack. And then we had a very similar display, except it didn't have those buttons. Instead, it displayed the results of the combat. So we have 2 situations in which we'll be displaying the enemy's values. You might guess that would be on the display enemy page. While I think about it, I'll zoom in a bit so it's a bit easier to see. And you'd be right. And because we're displaying it twice, that means that it makes the process a little more complicated. So I'll explain roughly what happens. We start with initialize. Once everything's done, we go to who is left. Who is left counts. You can just about see that says there's a little comment that says the number of enemies still alive. It has to count how many enemies are still alive. So it goes through what is now an array, which has the enemy's stamina. Before we just had a single variable, $ST, which was the enemy's stamina, but now we have multiple enemies. We turn that from a variable with a single value into an array with several values. In this case 2, but we could change that to any number that we wanted. And it counts, it goes through each stamina and says, is this stamina greater than 0? And if the stamina is greater than 0, that means the enemy is still in the fight. And it keeps track of how many there are that are in that situation. And the reason for that is because if there's only one enemy left, there's no point giving the player a choice of who to attack, because there'd only be one. You can only attack enemies that are still in the fight, of course. And if there's only one, it's not really a choice. It would just be getting them to click a button, which would be a waste of a waste of their time. And I could do it like that, but if you can sort of think about those types of situations and program around them, it makes the experience better, I think, for the player. The less sort of the less clicking to continue there is, and the more clicking with making an actual choice, the more of a game it is, and the more interesting it is, all else being equal. So it counts how many people are left. There'll either be 0, or the important distinctions are there'll be 0 left, there'll be 1 left, or there'll be more than 1 left. If there's 0 left, it says, oh, well, you've won. Great. Congratulations, you win the battle. Your adventure continues. If there's 1, it says, oh, well, we don't need to display the enemy and give the player a choice of who to attack, so we can go straight to combat. Combat is where the dice are rolled, or where it simulates rolling dice. Or if there's more than 1, it says, oh, we do need to display the enemies and give the player a choice. So it goes to display enemy. And there is a variable called $M, $M, as in M for mother, which I chose because it stands for mode, I suppose. And that keeps track of what sort of display we're doing. Are we displaying with a choice of who to attack, or are we displaying with telling the player the results? And if who is left finds 1 enemy, it sets M to be the value equivalent to display and give them a choice. So display enemy. Actually, I'll talk about combat next. I'll talk about display enemy last. So let's say there's only 1 enemy left. That won't be the case in this particular example, of course. Initially, there'll be 2 enemies left, so it'll go down here. But let's say there was only 1 and it went straight to combat. Well, this is where the dice are rolled. It's fairly straightforward. It uses the random command, which we've already discussed. Usually it's random bracket 1, 6 end bracket. That's how you simulate the roll of a normal 6-sided dice, or 6-sided die, sorry. So it'll generate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 with equal probability. And it keeps track of what each what each enemy has rolled, and what their total attack strength is, and then what you roll and what your attack strength is, and what the result of that is. So it compares your attack strength, the player character's, the player character's attack strength, to that of every enemy, and it says, all right, it beat this one, but that's not the one it's fighting, so nothing happens. It beat this one, and that is the one it's attacking, so that enemy loses 2 stamina. This one beat it, so the player character loses 2 stamina. This one's a tie, so nothing happens, and so on. And when combat has when it's done that, when it's rolled for everyone, it sends the player to display enemy to display the results. But it's displaying, it sets that $M variable, the mode variable, to a different value. It sets it to the value for give the results, rather than the value for give the player a choice. So, and then we have display enemy, and display enemy does what it says. It displays the enemies, and it has 2 modes. It will either, underneath each picture, it will either have, or each picture of a monster who is alive, it will have a button that says attack. That's the sort of choice mode. Or it will say that this monster rolled a 1 and a 6, and that their skill plus 1 plus 6 equals, whatever it equals. That is kept track of with M. So there's 2 ways that display enemy can go. If it's choosing, if it's in that choice mode, then you will click the button, you being the user, the player, will click whichever attack button they want, and then it will go to combat. Or if it's giving the results, it just gives the results, and then it has a button that says continue, and that button takes you to who is left. So that's quite a lot. Now you're probably starting to see why I didn't want to go through each line of code, because what I've just explained is very, I think, very complicated, probably a bit hard to understand at first listen, and that's just an overview. So I'll go through it in the order that we would encounter it. It will go here at the start of the program. It will say, how many enemies are there? There's two. There's two that are left alive. Okay, we need to give the player a choice. So it goes down here and it displays using the choice mode. The player clicks an attack button eventually, and that takes them to combat. And combat rolls all the dice that need to be rolled, or simulates doing so, and works out what the results of those dice rolls are. And then it goes back to display enemy, but now display enemy has a different mode. Now it displays the enemies with the results, and then there's a button that says continue, and then we go back to who is left. And it will, after one round, no enemy will be dead. You can't kill an enemy in one round because you only cause 2 stamina damage. So it'll count it again and say, oh, there's 2 left. So the flow of the program is who is left. We have a choice of who to attack. Okay, let's actually attack them. We go back to display enemy, and then we go back to who is left and start again. So we're going through this display enemy one twice. And the reason that I did that, I could have had 2 different pages. I could have had enemy choice and enemy result or something like that. But I thought that was sort of a waste because a lot of the code is basically the same, and the layout is, as you probably saw, the layout is almost the same. It's only really the stuff under the pictures that's different, and a few of the buttons and stuff. So it seemed more elegant to me to have it in a single on a single page. But I certainly could have done that, and that would have been simpler to follow because it would have just gone from sort of page 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and back to 1. But as it is, it goes from there to there to there to there, and then back again to there to there. Eventually, there'll probably be only one enemy left, and so we won't have that choice, and it'll just go combat, result, who's left, combat, result, until the end of the combat. So that is how it works. As I said, I'm trying a slightly different format where I'm not going to go through every line. I'm just going to go through the overview. As I said, I don't know if that's a good choice. Please let me know if you would prefer a longer video in which I go through everything line by line. Please let me know if you want me to go through these individual pages in a separate video. But that's how it works. And we still haven't done all of Fighting Fantasy Combat because we still haven't dealt with using your luck to influence the results, and we still haven't dealt with escaping. So that's what I want to do in future videos. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.